Your feelings will cloud your judgment. What do I mean by that? If I wanted to lose weight and eat healthy, right? I know what I need to do that. Most people know what they need to do that. And they start taking the actions. They get hungry, right? When I'm hungry and I want to eat, there's going to be two parts of my brain. One part of my brain knows what's actually going to help me in my long-term goals. The other part of my brain is fixated on surviving. In the modern world, that part of our brain, the part of our brain that's fixated on survival, is very overpowering. It's very hard to say no to this part of the brain because that's been geared in the past. Not now, because things are different now. We have food pretty much very easily accessible. Back in the last 100,000 years of human evolution, we've needed that part of the brain to tell us that, yo, we're hungry, we need to eat or to conserve energy. One of those two things. So this part of the brain will tell me, yo, we don't know if we're going to eat in a long time. We don't know the next time we're going to get a meal. There's food right in front of you and you're hungry. You need that food. Go eat it. That's what this part of the brain is telling you. Now, of course, your logical brain knows we have access to food in the modern world. We know that our long-term goals are to lose weight or to be lean or whatever those long-term goals are. We know that if we eat the food that's in front of us, it's not going to help us reach our long-term goals. The weird thing is this part of the brain, when it's not disciplined, when it's not trained, is going to start to succumb to this part of the brain. So logically, this part of the brain might even try to convince yourself to listen to this part of the brain. So it'll be like, well, you worked really hard today. You only ate a little bit this morning and you fasted and you were good for the whole day. Eating this isn't actually going to be that bad for you. And then it'll start to say these things that correlate with this part of the brain. Now you're telling yourself, it's not going to be too bad if I eat this. And I did good today, this, that, and the other. That's what's going to cause you to relapse and then eat that bad food, that cake, brownie, cookie, whatever's in front of you. So if we can learn to say no to this part of the brain, if we can learn and teach this part of the brain to say no to this part of the brain, that's like the ultimate self-control. But what this part of the brain does, the logic part of the brain, will convince you, if you're not careful, will try to convince you why it's okay to do that thing that's not aligned with your long-term goals, weirdly enough. But if we train this part of the brain to be disciplined, to value the long-term goals over succumbing to the way we feel, our feelings. That's how we're going to train ourselves to achieve those long-term goals, is by always prioritizing the delayed gratification versus the instant gratification, which is going to come from that part of the brain that's primal, that's about survival. And we know that it's not going to help us in the long-term goals. Another example would be if you have a test in 2 weeks. Primal part of your brain is going to say, relax, you had a long day, we're tired, we don't really want to work any harder. Intellectual part of your brain is going to say, you have a test in 2 weeks. It'd be nice if you just put a little bit more time and studied maybe 15, 30 minutes for that test so that you don't have to cram it all at once and that you're ready. And so logically, okay, I have a test, should probably study for it, right? And this part of your brain is going to be like, nah, you're chilling, just relax, you had a long day, we're tired, we don't want to work anymore. And this part of your brain is going to say, well, we kind of need to work. You can put like 15, 30 minutes. It's not that super long, but it's definitely going to help you for the next 2 weeks. And it'll be this conflict. And then a lot of times this part of your brain, if it's not trained, is going to start to say, well, you had a long day and you can always study tomorrow. You have a lot of time. It's in 2 weeks after all. And so you will logically convince yourself. Your brain will have a logical argument against itself to not do that thing. And it's very interesting. If you have this knowledge, you can start to observe it. I don't want you to make the perfect decisions yet, but next time you make a decision, notice how your feelings will start to affect your judgment. Notice how your feelings are going to affect the intelligent part of your brain. Notice how it's going to change the way you think. And it's like, you'll notice that your brain will try to convince you why it's okay. And then if you let that happen, you're going to do that bad habit, or the habit that's not for the long term, the habit that's not going to help you get to the long term. And so a lot of the times you'll find you actually convince yourself with logic. It sounds actually good when you convince yourself. You make up a pretty good reason why you shouldn't do, or why you should or shouldn't do something that's not going to help you in the long term. You make up a pretty good logical argument why this time it's okay. And that keeps on happening, and it keeps on happening. And so next time you feel something, you feel that primal part of your brain, next time you feel that pulling you to do something that's not going to help you in the long term, listen to what your logical brain starts saying and how it'll try to cope and convince why it's a good idea to do that. And so if you know your long-term goals and you're like, no, I know delaying gratification is good. I know that this thing isn't going to help me. You up here are going to try to convince me otherwise. But this time I'm paying attention. This time I'm ready. I know you're going to try to make an argument, but I'm not even going to listen to you, and have that discipline to say no this time. And as you say no more and more to those things, of course you might say no, no, and then this other time yes, and then no, 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 and then yes that third time. But the more times you say no and you stick to that long-term gratification, the easier it is to avoid that relapse. And so if you want to have better habits, first off, you have to be aware of that bad decision you're making. But after you're aware of it, listen to that argument your brain tries to have, and then just say, nah, this time we're going to go build that discipline and say no. And we're focused on the long-term goal, the most important goal to us. And the more you do that, the more your brain will reinforce itself. The more it'll be like, no, the long-term goal is more important. I know what you're trying to do with your little primal instincts, but that's why I have a logical brain, is to pick the things that are actually going to help me in the long term. And so while my feelings say this, I know what I need to do, and I'm going to do it this time. And then as you do that more and more and more, you start to do the hard things more, the things that aren't as easy, the things that are a little bit harder, the self-control, the discipline. You start to do those things more, and it reinforces yourself and your beliefs. And then now you start to believe in yourself. You start to believe that you will always pick the harder decision that's going to help you in the long run. And as you do it more, you reinforce it more. And it's like a cycle of boom, something, temptation, whatever. There's something there that I want. But if I do eat that thing, I'm sacrificing my long-term goals. What's more important to me? The little short-term feeling good or the long-term goals? And the answer must always be the long-term goals. And so that reinforces your brain to always pick the long-term goals over the instant gratification. And so you'll always pick the long-term goals, and it'll be more and more consistent over time. And so that is honestly how you develop habits that are game-changing. And a good leader has to always pick the thing that's best in the long term, the thing that's going to help his people in the long term, something that might even sacrifice the way he looks, his community, something that may even get him a bit ostracized. In the long run, it's the best decision for that group. And so building these disciplines, building this specific discipline, the discipline of focusing on the long game, building that discipline is crucial for a leader, because otherwise it's always going to be, what's the short-term game? And even if it sacrifices the long-term goals, a bad leader will choose the short-term gains just because temporarily it'll maybe increase his personal status or do something that in the short term helps, but in the long run, it doesn't help. It's just they want the results quicker. A good leader will always pick the long-term goal results. And so these are the decisions we need to get better at as leaders. These are the decisions that we need to make that are going to help us all in the long term. My name's Justin, and remember, you deserve the consequences of your actions.